At some point on the journey of self-discovery, maybe after a profound spiritual breakthrough or the gentle crumbling of your sense of self, you felt the earth move beneath your feet. What once felt like home turned unfamiliar. You broke through the facade of delusion, glimpsing the inner workings of your habits, the overwhelming clamor of the world around you, and then a stillness arrived. At first, this stillness felt holy, even liberating, like walking out of a smoke-filled room into fresh air. But gradually, meaning began to fade, not in a dramatic collapse, but as a subtle vanishing, as if your spirit dimmed the lights on existence and left them off. You stopped pushing, stopped pretending, not from hopelessness, but from a deep, sacred weariness, a quiet emptying that felt oddly serene, yet strangely motionless. Then, a soft whisper emerged, a gentle but persistent question. Why do I feel so hollow now that I've glimpsed the truth? This is the contradiction no one prepares you for. We're taught that spiritual awakening will ignite our purpose, that seeing through falsehoods will set us ablaze with focus. But for many, especially the sensitive souls, the seekers, the empaths, the inward explorers, it does something different. It hollows you out. It clears away all inauthentic drives until even longing feels foreign. In that emptiness, we often mistake awakening for indifference. I remember a heartfelt talk with a close friend, a brilliant mind, deeply in tune with spirituality, well-versed in the teachings of Eckhart Tolle, Krishnamurti, and Alan Watts. She had come through a dark night of the soul with a clarity that was almost tangible. She shared how she saw through the illusions of self, success, and external validation. Yet, just 2 months later, I found her lying in bed, gazing at the ceiling, adrift in an unexpected stillness. I used to feel guilty for not doing enough, she said. Now, I don't care if I do anything at all. I thought awakening would spark a recovered at me, but instead, I feel like I've been put out. She expected awakening to set her on fire. Instead, she felt extinguished. Carl Jung spoke directly to this pivotal moment, calling it the sacred ground between the dissolution of the ego and the emergence of the true self. A liminal space, daunting in its silence, where the drive once fueled by social masks and external validation fades, leaving only the unshaped essence of what's yet to form. This isn't failure, it's individuation, the chrysalis phase of the psyche, where the caterpillar melts into formlessness before transforming into a butterfly. It's the psychological death necessary for rebirth. But we must not mistake this void for a step backward, for within this emptiness lies a deeper summons, a subtle heartbeat of soul truth, waiting to be felt. This isn't the drive to prove yourself, but the urge to simply be, to act not for applause, but from inner harmony. This piece isn't about hopelessness. It's about the phase after awakening when the old energy fades and a new source of vitality is still taking shape. Jung understood that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The loss of motivation isn't the end. It's the sacred start of living not as a facade, but as a soul. Jung, the pioneer of analytical psychology, foresaw this strange, quiet fog that descends after awakening long before it became a topic in modern spiritual discussions. He didn't dress it up in mystical or ecstatic terms. He spoke with sharp clarity about the soul's descent into its own depths. Enlightenment, Jung wrote, does not come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. These words, though poetic, hold a stark truth. True awakening doesn't crown you with joy. It strips you bare. It dismantles the framework of the false self, initiating a slow, sacred death, the death of who you thought you were. This internal collapse has far-reaching effects. Your former ambitions, success, recognition, achievement begin to dissolve. The timelines you chased, the goals that once propelled you, even the structures of identity that shaped your relationships, work, and daily life start to fade like mirages in the light of a deeper reality. But here's the psychological nuance. Your ego doesn't vanish. It becomes disoriented. The script it once followed has been erased, but a new one hasn't yet appeared. The result isn't laziness or apathy, but a profound spiritual in-between. You're no longer asleep, but you're not yet fully awake to what's next. This is the mystery, what Jung called the negrado, the blackening phase of alchemy, where the ego is dismantled, but the true self hasn't yet taken its place. In modern terms, it looks like demotivation, but in Jungian terms, it's a holy pause, an in-between space where the soul turns inward to rewrite its story. Yet, our culture dreads this silence. Jung warned that the modern world does everything to avoid this phase, to pathologize it, numb it, or medicate it, because it cannot understand a transformation that doesn't look like progress. But what you're experiencing isn't a step backward. It's an initiation, a sacred descent. This isn't clinical depression, though it may share its shadows. It's the soul refusing to engage in a life it no longer aligns with. And Jung believed this was the beginning of individuation, the sacred becoming of the true self. Most people don't talk about this part, do they? The ache after the light, the silence after the revelation. But this silence isn't empty, it's formative. If you can stand still within it, listening to what it asks of you, you may see that what feels like demotivation is actually the start of a deeper alignment. The world may tell you you're lost, but Jung would say you're being reshaped by something far more authentic. If you've been drifting through the haze that follows awakening, staring into the stillness where your spark once burned, know this: you're not broken. You're undergoing a profound psychic shift that our culture has no name for. A metamorphosis so deep, it doesn't just challenge your thoughts, it reconfigures the very framework of your inner world. The ambitions that once fueled you, deadlines, goals, 5-year plans, the mantras of hustle, now fall flat. Not because you've failed, but because the structure that housed your motivation is dissolving. Jung foresaw this unraveling long before it was whispered about on digital platforms. Let's understand this clearly. For most of your life, your energy came from the persona, the constructed self, the mask you wore to navigate the world. That identity, the one that craved admiration, validation, and applause, wasn't a flaw. It was a necessary stage of human development. As Jung wrote, the persona is a system of behavior imposed upon the individual by society's expectations. But when you awaken, you see the mask for what it is, a performance, and that performance no longer drives you. You can't chase applause once you realize the stage is an illusion. The result? The goals you once cherished now feel alien. They were written by a self that no longer exists within you. This creates an eerie silence within, like an actor stepping off stage, forgetting their lines, not out of confusion, but because the script no longer resonates with the soul. You feel directionless, not because you've lost your way, but because you've outgrown the identity that needed a destination. You didn't lose your drive, you outgrew the fuel that powered it. What stirs within you now isn't absence, but a sacred pause, a quiet void, preparing to be filled with something truer, something born not of performance, but of presence. The ego pushes, the soul waits, and in that waiting, something sacred begins. Jung believed the aim of life isn't to elevate the ego, but to integrate it into a larger, deeper psychic wholeness. We're not here to serve the ego's desires, but to refine it, temper it, and align it with the self, the transcendent center of our being that connects us to the greater whole. He called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of moving from fragmentation to inner unity, not to become a self that's praised, but to become a self that's real. The self, unlike the ego, isn't concerned with approval or performance. It isn't driven by ambition, but by alignment. Its only desire is to express what's true. So, after a spiritual awakening, the psyche begins a sacred recalibration. What once felt thrilling now feels hollow. Your system starts rejecting everything artificial, forced, or inauthentic. Careers built on insecurity, relationships based on roles, even the vision board you created from your old self's fear of not being enough. This inner purification often feels like both liberation and disorientation. You're shedding the false, but what takes its place? Jung cautioned that many get stuck here. Some awaken and fall into spiritual bypassing, mistaking transcendence for escape. They float above life, call everything an illusion, and convince themselves nothing matters. But detachment isn't disconnection. The self doesn't want you to vanish from the world. It wants to live through you. It seeks embodiment, not withdrawal. But before that embodiment, there's a threshold, and Jung described it well, though few recognize it when they're in it. It's the gray space after awakening, the void that comes not with bliss, but with bewilderment. It doesn't look poetic. It doesn't trend. It looks like sitting quietly while the world rushes by, unable to explain who you're becoming. Jung would say, you're not failing, you're in between. You've stepped out of the ego, but the self hasn't yet become your foundation. This liminal space isn't a mistake. It's an initiation, a descent into the unknown that modern culture has no patience for. Stillness is misdiagnosed as laziness. A pause is mistaken for paralysis. So you begin to judge yourself, and that judgment becomes the wall blocking the energy your soul is calling forth.